Welcome to the Shells Exchange podcast, where we discuss all things women, whether it's dating, relationships, motherhood to careers, entrepreneurship, or securing your seat at the table. The Shells Exchange gives influencers who may not be considered mainstream a platform to share their perspectives in a comfortable and safe space. Today we meet Dr. Kym Harris-Lee, a board-certified executive coach, speaker, and published author. Described as a velvet hammer, she utilizes a strategic and intuitive approach to guide clients out of their comfort zones in a way that minimizes discomfort and amplifies desired results. Having enjoyed a career as an executive focused on talent and leadership development, Dr. Kym has learned a lot about what it takes to masterfully manage and negotiate a successful career. In this episode, Dr. Kym takes us on a journey of her career and pathway to entrepreneurship. Let's get into our conversation with Dr. Kym. Take us back to when you were a younger woman or a younger child, and bring us through a journey of who you are today.
Oh my goodness. That's a big question, Shalon.
Yes, it
It's huge. So I'll start by saying, I won't give you kind of the precursor. I'll start by saying I was raised by a single mom. I am a twin. I have a twin brother and I have a younger brother. And I think that what I learned and what all three of us learned growing up that has impacted kind of where I am is that, and what we learned from my mom in terms of the things that she did to provide for us, is that anything is possible, right? If you're willing to really work hard and if you're clear about what your options are. So she was a nurse. She worked in the evening. She went to school during the day. She was involved in the community. So what we learned from her is, I think, commitment, dedication, and focus, right? Which is kind of where I am today. And then I think the other thing that she instilled in us was the value of education. So I don't know about my twin brother, but I know for me, I just assumed everybody went to college because it was like, because I just thought that that's what you were supposed to do, right? I mean, you go to high school, you graduate from high school, you go to college. It wasn't until I was in college that I realized everybody didn't go to college. But my mother was so in terms of the structure that she provided for us, she just led us to believe that that was what we were supposed to do, and that's what everybody did. And so, I think that's what's led me, from a bachelor's degree to a master's degree to a doctorate degree. Now, I will say that, unlike my twin brother, I rebelled a little bit on the doctorate degree because what I realized was that. That's more than a notion, and it's not something that you just do at that level. There has to be something that you are particularly passionate about, because you spend a lot of time studying, researching, and writing about it. So while my brother did a master's degree, a law degree, and a PhD, and I think he tried. Did he try medical school? I'm not sure. He may have, because my mother wanted a doctor. But I kind of pushed back a little bit, and I was I was in my early 30s before I figured out what I wanted to do at the postgraduate level in terms of the doctoral program. And that was just as a result of the interest that I gained as I moved through my career. So I think that was a huge influence. And then, I don't know, just this idea of, I guess the other piece because I've been reflecting, the other piece that was very important to me was for people to look at me and not just see pretty. Because when I grew up, I have a twin brother, as I said, and so there was always comparison, right? So he was the smart one, and I was the pretty one. Now it's interesting because as we talk as adults, he's like, "Well, nobody ever called me handsome. Everybody just kept telling you how pretty you were." I was like, "Hey, I would much rather have people tell me I'm smart than tell me I'm pretty. I cannot even believe you're hung up on that, right?" But but what that did was it just really instilled in me the importance of showing up smart and pretty, showing up smart first and pretty. So I think those are the things that really influence me if I think about how I moved through my life and how I got to this point. Because how I got to this point was a critical incident that was a result of my mindset. People have to know I'm smart. I have to show up smart. And in showing up smart, while that did serve me for a period of time, when I got to a certain level in my career, people knew I was smart. It was obvious. They wanted something more from me, right? But because I was so comfortable in showing up smart, I couldn't figure out what that was until after the fact. And after the fact, I realized that you got to balance this idea of smart with relationships. And so that's how I came up with my coaching mantra, which is competence is more than performance. So I work with very smart and accomplished leaders like me, right, who need to understand that, like me, once you're in a role, if you're at a senior director role or a VP role or a senior VP role, people know you're smart. That's what got you there, right? Now, what are you doing to really be able to influence, inspire, motivate, and effectively lead, right? And what that is about connection, and it's about relationships, and it's about trust. So I will share, I figured this out after having a conversation with my leader one day. And in that conversation, she shared with me that her boss, who was the CEO of the organization, thought that I was incompetent. Right? It's like, what? What do you mean? And I mean, it was a gut punch, and it was really a wake up call for me. And I just couldn't imagine why anybody would think that I was incompetent. And as you can imagine, it went right back to my pretty smart thing, right? It's like, okay, well, am I perpetrating here? Am I really an imposter? Maybe I'm not as smart as I think I am, right? So I came out of that conversation devastated. It took me about a week to get myself together. And I got a coach, and I said, listen, the CEO is walking around thinking I'm incompetent. And he's thinking about that. He's thinking that way in the presence of performance reviews that are exceeds and above average, merit increases that were based on performance, and they were quite rich, and bonuses that were based on performance and were embarrassingly rich. And so I'm like, you don't reward somebody in that way who is incompetent. And so she went and got me some feedback, and she came back and she said, so I know that it's important for you that people know that you're smart and capable. So let me tell you what they said. She's brilliant. She's turned the department around. She's really made an impact. But they also said, Kym, we don't know her. We have no idea who she is. When she shows up at our door, we know it's a transaction. We know it's about the work. There's no connection. It's like she's hiding, right? She's hiding who she is, and we want more of her. And it took me, by the time I figured out what more was, I had been downsized because the organization had been downsizing for quite some time. They finally made it to the corporate office. But I tell people my truth is that I got fired because I got fired. But in the context of downsizing, unfortunately, because it was in the context of downsizing, I had a really nice package that allowed me to kind of take a year sabbatical and figure out what I wanted to do. And so I interviewed, but I had always said that I wanted to coach. And so I interviewed and got the press, and I started coaching and got energized. And so by the time my 12 months ended, I said, okay, you got to make a decision. What are you going to do? And I said, I'm gonna start a coaching business. I can always go back and get another job. One of my core values has always been, because I wasn't married at the time, had always been financial security. And so, but I also knew that every goal I had ever set for myself, I had accomplished. And so I said to myself, this is bigger because you got to eat, you got to keep a roof over your head. You don't want your quality of life to change, but you can do it. And if you fail, you can always go get a job. I haven't looked back since. So I know that I am living and working on purpose, because this work that I do has come with ease. And I'm blessed to say that, like a lot of people, I haven't struggled. My lifestyle has not changed. And I'm doing work that I love for the very first time in my career. So,
wow. That's truly a blessing in disguise.
Yes.
Let go from your job and things like that.
Absolutely.
Immediately, we don't see that. It takes a while.
It was the best thing. It was the best thing that could have happened to me. The absolute best thing that could have happened to me. Yep.
Wow. You said a few things that got my antennas working. I want to go back a little bit, because you said it wasn't until your early 30s until you truly started to realize what your passions were and things of that nature. And sometimes we feel a little bit forced to decide what we want to do younger than that, because college starts at 17, 18 for some people. And then some people go straight into college. Like, I was one of those people in college at 17. I'm not even using my bachelor's degree, to be honest. How do we know what our path should be at that age?
We don't know. I think it's only a few people who do know. You know, you may have a sense of the things that interest you, but I think at that age, you just go where your interests are, because most people over the course of their life have 2, 3, 4 careers, right? And so I think about myself. I went into college thinking I wanted to be a psychologist. And because I had a psychology teacher in high school that I loved, I enjoyed the topic. But then when I realized you had to have a PhD to be a psychologist, I'm like, and my undergrad experience, I'm like, I'm not enjoying this experience. I'm not staying in school that long. Right?
I did the same thing.
Yes, exactly. So I switched. Well, I did study psychology, but then I ended up in retail and was attracted to human resources because, I went to career fairs and that kind of thing, and met a woman, Doris Bacon, I'll never forget her, who was in HR in a large retail company. And we just hit it off. So I ended up working at this retail company through their management trainee program, right? But it wasn't retail that I was interested in so much as it was HR. And and I tend to follow my interests, which is what I tell people. You got to pay attention to where the energy is for you and follow that. And so I stayed in retail for a while, realized I hated it because I only did like one rotation in HR. And then said, well, I'm just going to go back to school and get an MBA, and I'm going to focus on HR, right? Because that's really where my interest is. And then I got jobs in HR, kind of that HR generalist work, but then realized that I had some passion around training. So I switched tracks and I ended up moved into training. And then doing the training, I realized that leadership development was something I was particularly interested in after getting some exposure to that. And so I changed tracks and I went there. And that's kind of what led to the PhD work in organizational leadership, right? So little did I know back then at 17 that I would end up having a doctorate degree anyway, right? But what I like about where I am and how I got here was that it was all based on my interest. It wasn't because somebody said, this is what you need to be, or I decided this is what I'm going to be. I just followed my interests. I paid attention to what excited me, what I enjoyed studying, what I enjoyed talking about. And every time something peaked, I just moved in that direction. Now, fortunately for me, not fortunately, but for me, it was all under this umbrella of HR, but that doesn't have to be the case.
Right. Our stories are eerily similar.
Really?
So you also talked about building relationships and connecting with people. So it's not just going to work and not connecting with your coworkers or speaking with them and just going, do your work and go home. And that's something I also had to learn over the years. How do you start to build those authentic relationships when you first get into the career world and continuing throughout that journey?
That's a good question. First of all, I think one of the things I've had a lot of, I'm going to call them young people, but people who are young in their career ask me, they say, I go in an environment where people seem so different from me, right? And I just have no idea how to connect to them. And my question back to them is always, how do you make friends? Right? So outside of work, how do you make friends? We're drawn to people, right? And I think in the workplace, what we have to be mindful of is who we're drawn to and why we're drawn to them, right? And then we have to say to ourselves, how diverse is my professional network inside the organization, right? Am I just associating, having lunch with everybody who looks like me, right? Or do I have a diverse network inside this organization? And think in terms of peers, think in terms of leaders who you might see as role models, right? That you see them, do you see them doing work that you would want to do? And so it's asking for 30 minutes on the calendar of a leader and doing an informational interview. It's asking for 30 minutes and saying, would love to have a cup of coffee with you and talking for 30 minutes. It's spending time with people during your lunch break, right? Are you running errands on lunch and setting up your doctor's appointments for lunch breaks? Or are you taking that and using that as a time to fellowship in a professional way where you can sit, have food, relax, and just talk about who you are and what you've accomplished, and ask people who they are and what they've accomplished and why they've made this particular job choice and what are some of the challenges that they've had. It's about really making the time to spend time with other people. It's about Monday morning, getting a cup of coffee and doing drive-bys during the course of the day, and just, hey, how you doing? How was your weekend? So it doesn't have to be hard work. It just has to be intentional work, because it's very easy to just get focused on the work, but the work's not going anywhere. So we've got to carve out time to form the relationships. And I like to say relationships that matter. They should be authentic. And you should be comfortable sharing information about yourself, and not necessarily your situations, like you broke up with your boyfriend, but things like, who you are. Like you asked me, you asked me a broad question that allowed me the opportunity to give you a sense of who I am and how I became who I am. Right? So it's really just asking people about themselves, because everybody loves to talk about themselves. But in return, you have to share information about yourself as well, because people get suspicious of folks who simply ask for information but don't share information.
Right. That's so true. Now, could we switch gears a little bit? And I want to talk about, what are some of the challenges that you faced throughout your career?
Challenges. I think probably 99.9% of the challenges that I faced throughout my career were related to my personal style. Now, in retrospect, I can say that to you, right? And a lot of that too goes back to how I was raised. So it's the message, the well-intended message that we all get, that you got to work twice as hard. And Lord knows the things that are going on in the world now. I mean, it's just, it kind of just confirms a lot of the socialization that we got growing up, right? So work twice as hard, never let them see you sweat is what my grandfather would tell me. So that was like, don't let people know that you need help. Don't ask for help. And my mom would say, never admit that you made a mistake. So most of my career, I was armored and masked, trying to create an image that was burdensome, really, because a lot of times I was defensive. If somebody would ask me a question that I didn't know the answer to, it was like, how do I demonstrate that that I know something when I really don't know something? So it was just, I think most of my challenge related to, quite frankly, how I showed up in the organization and the walls that I created. And sometimes we get in our own way. And that doesn't mean that there aren't variables around us that don't create a challenge for us. That doesn't mean that. But it does mean that we need to stop sometimes and think about what barriers am I creating for myself, right? What assumptions am I walking around with that are impacting how I'm showing up, how I'm interacting with other people? Because that was the case for me. That was the case for me. Did that answer your question?
Sure did.
Okay.
Sure did. But it leads me to my next question a little bit, because you talk about personal style, you talk about a lot of things that your parents taught you growing up, how that showed up in your career. Now, I want to kind of talk about how sometimes as women, we go into work and if we're verbal about something that concerns us, we're perceived as being angry. We're not angry, we're passionate, we're ambitious, we're so much more. How can you kind of shift that perception when you just want to get your point across?
I'm just writing down some things because you said a couple of things I want to address. So I believe, and this is what I talk to clients about, there's a difference between the what and the how, right? So and authenticity is a cornerstone of my coaching philosophy. But I make a difference. I make a distinction between raw authenticity and refined authenticity. And this kind of goes to, I think, what you're saying around the passion. So there's a difference between being assertive and aggressive. And to be assertive is to communicate in a way that allows others to hear you. And so when I think about authenticity, I think about assertiveness. So, and I'm going to give you an example of a client, a real life example of a client's story. So I had a client, and she found herself in Dubai with a lot of senior leaders from her organization and her chief HR officer. At the end of a meeting, her chief HR officer asked her this question, and I'm paraphrasing it. It was something like, where do you think our opportunities are from a diversity and inclusion perspective? Well, this client had some very strong feelings about that. And she proceeded to answer the question in this way. And again, I'm paraphrasing. Y'all really need to do a better job at diversity and inclusion because Black people are angry and y'all have no idea what is going on and the dynamic that you are creating in the organization. And she proceeded to go on. Now, what do you think happened? She shut down that conversation. That chief HR officer backed away from her. Clearly, she alienated this woman. Now imagine being in Dubai, thousands of miles away from home, knowing that you have just alienated the chief HR officer. You can't run home, that's right, and debrief in an environment that makes you feel safe. I mean, you're just out there. Now, she says to me, well, Dr. Kym, she asked me my opinion. They tell us to bring our most authentic selves to work. I told her what I think. So I said this to her. Suppose you had said something like, I really appreciate you asking my opinion on this because I do have some rather strong thoughts and opinions. I've had coworkers come to me and express some concerns. And honestly, I've had some experiences myself. I would love for us to sit down over drinks or dinner and talk about what we as an organization can do to address some of the issues that I've not only experienced, but heard about from some of my coworkers. Do you think we could do that? Raw, what y'all need to do, refine, would love the opportunity to talk more about this. Thanks for giving me a platform, because I've had some experiences and my coworkers have had some experiences. And that's what assertiveness looks like. Talking, sharing your beliefs, right? But doing it in a way that opens the door. It doesn't close the door. So that's the first thing as it relates to passion. We can be passionate, but we need to understand who our audiences are. Who are we talking to, right? Particularly if we've got a particularly sensitive topic and we want and need to be heard. What is the best way to communicate, right? You can still be direct, but you can be diplomatic. The other thing you mentioned was this idea of ambition. And I just posted a few weeks ago on my Instagram page, don't let your ambition get in the way of your talent, right? Because I was talking to another young lady who I coach, and she was talking to me about a relationship that she has with a coworker. And she was saying, well, I do this and she doesn't do that. And, and I do this. They're peers. They have the same role and responsibility, but for different segments of the organization. And what was clear to me and what I know about this young lady is that she is very ambitious. From the time I've met her, it's always been about her career, right? And she's always shows up above, a step above, because she is ambitious. And I said to her, your ambition is getting in the way of your relationship with your peer. So instead of you trying to outperform her, why don't you become or form a collaborative relationship with her? So when you all are on a call together, instead of you feeling like you're going to come prepared with all the answers and you'll show her up, why don't you all have a prep call before the meeting and talk about what are the points that we want to make? What points will you make? What points will I make? Because at the end of the day, it's not about your ambition or her inability to do the job. It's about how you serve the organization and the leaders in the organization. And you all should be collaborating on that. And I said to her, don't allow your ambition to get in your way, because if people simply see you as ambitious, somebody who's willing to step over, compete with, to get ahead, that's not going to serve you well. But if they see you as someone who has an interest in your career in advancing, and you do it through collaboration, nurturing and cultivating relationships that matter, that will sell well. You simply being ambitious will not sell well.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's not something that I learned immediately getting into the career world. Although I'm a natural collaborator, I'm a natural knowledge sharer. I don't think it serves me well to keep anything to myself. So I've always been that person in the workplace. But where do you think that comes from? Because I do see a lot of times where I can only speak for women because I'm a woman, but I've seen that women that I'm around sometimes, they compete a lot.
And it's, I don't know what it comes from, but I also work in healthcare. So let's say that I work in healthcare, and this is the first time that I'm working in healthcare. And out of all of the other industries that I've worked in, I feel like this has been the most competitive. And it seems to work for some people. So how are you able to distinguish whether I should be a collaborator or a competitor, or should I do both?
Yeah, that's a great question, Shalon. And I guess I think you should be a collaborator and also balance that with times where simply you're doing your best work, right? So for me, because I don't do well in environments that are competitive, because I find that if I'm competing, I'm not doing my best work because I'm always thinking about the other person. But if I'm simply thinking, Kym, what's the best job I can do on this? Is this my best? It doesn't matter what somebody else is doing. And sometimes it's just me and the work. But other times I'm making decisions or working on something where I think, what other perspectives would enhance the quality of this outcome, of this deliverable? Who has a point of reference about this that would help me, right? Or if you're making a decision and you realize now, who else is this decision going to impact? And because it's going to impact others, or this project is going to impact others, I need to go over here, get their perspective, understand their thinking, and understand the impact, right? So I wouldn't say it's when should I collaborate and when should I compete? It's when should I collaborate and when do I simply need to just do my best work?
Right. I'm going to go with both because I've been doing both.
Yeah. I think that strong performers who excel and truly add value to the organization do both. They do their best work and they collaborate. Yeah. And sometimes they do their best work through collaboration, right? So, yeah, collaboration is a tool.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
So I also want to talk about you being an author. Now, I've not had a chance to read your books, but I am going to read it, especially because you have a book titled The Young Professional Woman, Breaking into the Business World and Succeeding, Lessons from the Future, a Letter to My 25-Year-Old Self. I wish I had something like that. I needed this book 10 years ago. Having books like that is so important because it's really difficult. Like I come from a neighborhood in New York that doesn't have that many resources. But because I'm a natural researcher and I always had that ambition, I was able to get certain opportunities that, I researched by myself. I didn't get that from my school, but everybody doesn't have that opportunity. And if I actually had more resources like this, I could have been further in my career or I could have been on a different path. Who knows? But the point is that this is a necessary tool that I think is important for a lot of us to have. So can you talk us through that book and your other books if you would like?
Yeah. So I will share with you that is not my book. That is a chapter in a book. So it is a compilation of chapters from different authors. And that's actually how I started my writing. There was a woman on LinkedIn. She was looking for authors to contribute to this particular book with that title. And my chapter in that book was A Letter to My 25-Year-Old Self.
Okay.
And so for me, that was particularly significant because at 25, on my 25th birthday, my mother took my twin brother and I out to dinner. Red Lobster, I'll never forget. They went into Red Lobster and I sat in the car and cried. I mean, literally cried. and I cried because, when we're younger, at least, I don't know, when I was younger, everything was about when I turned 25, when I turned 25, when I turned 25, when I turned 25. And I had turned 25 and I had done nothing but accumulated a lot of debt. I was in a job that I did not like in retail. I just, I was not living my best life. I mean, home was okay, but it just didn't fit the vision that I had of myself at 25. And on that birthday, I swore to myself I would never have another birthday like that. Never would I have another birthday like that. And soon after that, I left New Jersey, moved to Florida to work on my MBA. I mean, just still had some challenges, but with a clear vision that I was never going to have another birthday like that. And so I think for me, it was important to kind of take a reflective look on, where I was and how I got there and how I felt about myself at that point, and I don't know, we never know what's coming. We never know what's coming, but given the opportunity to just talk to that 25-year-old Kym, to say, you're going to be all right. All the things that you envision for yourself, you will achieve. You're going to stumble, but you're going to be okay. You're going to find love. You're going to have some heartbreaks, but you're going to be okay, And so just to be able to reflect back and just tell myself it was a journey and it was all worth it. It was important for me to take that moment to do that and to, I guess, have it captured in something that I could always refer back to. The other book, which the same woman kind of did the editing for, again, a compilation of authors, that's really where this idea of competence being more than performance was birthed. Because I was writing about, because I'm trying to think, did I do 2 or 3 chapters? Maybe I did. I don't remember. But I was writing, I think, about the idea of feedback. I'm not sure, that may have been a chapter in the book. And this is why I say you just never know, because back then when I wrote that chapter, and just as I was writing, I thought to myself, competence is more than performance. That was the first time it came to me. But I had no idea that 10 years later or 8 years later, that my whole business would be based on that concept of competence being more than performance, and more would become my methodology, more mindset would become my methodology. And so it kind of goes back to what I was saying, that we've got to pay attention, right, to the things that drive us, the things that pique our interest, how people respond to the things that we do and say, and then build on those things. You can't go through life just moving through life and not paying attention. And that's where the idea, I guess, of being present comes from, and having a clear view of how people respond to you, the good and the bad. And again, where your energy comes from, what excites you, all of that is important. And all of these things, the contributing to these books, led to me writing my own book, but they also led to me building my business and shaping my philosophy around coaching and helping leaders be more effective in the workplace. That makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Can I tell you, I cried on my 25th birthday too, on the train.
Did you really?
On the train. It was around the same thing. I've always been so calculated and planning everything, trying to plan out my whole life. Career-wise, though, not necessarily relationships, but career-wise.
Right.
By 25, I didn't do everything that I thought I would have done by 25, because when you're younger, 25 is so old,
Yes, exactly.
You gotta have it together. But it wasn't the case. I cried on the train.
Yeah. I don't know why we do that to ourselves. But like you, I've always been goal driven. And I think, I think about my husband, bless his heart. because, he'll always say to me, you just push the envelope. You're always pushing the envelope to the edge. I'm like, 'cause I believe anything is possible. And I got big goals. I got big dreams, right? But I think sometimes what happens with that too is that people are hesitant to communicate certain things to us. Like I think my husband might be, as we plan our life together, he's hesitant to say, okay, Kym, I'm going to do this for fear that he might not make it, right? But my perspective is dreams and goals are fluid. I just want to know you're moving in the direction. You know what I'm saying? I know sometimes things change and the target moves, but it's the process of getting there, that's important to me. But I do think that it can be, when you're so goal driven, it can be intimidating to some people, because particularly the people that we're closest to, because they don't want to disappoint us, right? Mm-hmm. They see our drive and they want to match that, but they don't want to disappoint us by not being able to get there. Yeah. And to me, it's not about the destination. It's about the journey. Mm-hmm. It's about the journey, because that's where we live. That's how we grow,
That leads me to my next point. What advice would you have for a young woman? I want to make it specific because I know you could give us tons of advice. But what advice would you have for a young woman looking to get into leadership?
Mm-hmm. I think the first thing would be to be good at your craft, whatever that is, right? And stay current, right? Don't feel like once you've gotten a certain degree or whatever that you're there, that you don't need to continue learning, because learning takes place in a lot of different ways. There's so much to read on the web. There are professional magazines. There are, Google alerts. There's just so much. So be sure that you stay current generally, but also stay current in terms of what's happening in your organization, right? And I always make the distinction for leaders between functional expertise and business expertise, or functional leadership and business leadership, right? So we all start as functional leaders. We just want to become really skilled and known for whatever our area of expertise is. But at some point, you need to shift to business leadership, where you have, and blend the two, where you have to be able to sit in a room and speak to business issues, not just issues specific to your area. And if they're not talking about your area, you don't have anything to contribute, right? But your views about the business and the trends in the business and the trends in the industry. So I think that young women should really do both, right? Now, don't wait. Do both now. Become good at what you do, whatever your area of expertise is, but also become good about understanding what's going on in the business. So no matter what room you are sitting in, you can contribute to the conversation. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, don't get so focused on the work that you lose sight of the relationships. Because in my last role, I was responsible for our talent review process and succession planning. And I cannot tell you how many times I sat around a table with senior leaders, and one leader by leader, they're putting up people who are ready for promotion. And the commentary in the room is, well, I don't know that person. I've never had any exposure to that person. No, because I don't have a point of reference. I can't support that, right? And so I say, cultivate and nurture relationships that matter. And I don't mean, relationships that will serve, but when I say relationships that matter, I'm talking about relationships where there is an authentic and genuine connection, where someone can say they know you and you know them. And when your name comes up at a table and somebody's speaking to your readiness for something, and someone says, well, I don't think they're ready because of such and such and such and such, 2 or 3 other people will say, well, that's only because you haven't had exposure to her. This is what I know about Shalon. A, B, C, D. And then you got 2 more people who could say, yeah, I can vouch for that because I had just had lunch with her the other day and this is what we talked about. And I happen to know, here's where she comes from and here's what's important to her and these are her values and, this is how she's contributed to the organization thus far. And I know that what she wants, what she aspires to is X, Y, Z. So when you have relationships like that where you are truly showing up, telling people who you are, what's important to you, what you've accomplished, you're learning about people. So they're advocating and sponsoring you, not just because they know, but because they feel a connection. You know just as much about them as they know about you. You all have talked so much, you've established what the common ground is between you, whether you come from the same hometown, you graduated from the same colleges, you both have a twin, whatever it is, but people are invested in you. And so that doesn't mean you bypass everybody else between you and a senior leader, but you form relationships all the way up. And that takes time. And you have to be intentional about it. So those are the 2 pieces of advice I would give. Balance functional leadership with business leadership. Stay current in your field, understand the trends in the business that you're in and the industries that you're in, and develop relationships that matter, authentic relationships where people can call you friend. They feel that good about you, that they can say, not only is she a colleague, but she's a friend. And I feel so comfortable with her and I trust her and I believe in her capabilities.
That is great. Thank you so much, Dr. Kym. That was great advice.
Welcome.
Everybody can use that advice, not just a young woman, but older women, young men, older men. We all can use that. So I really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
I appreciate you meeting with me today as well.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for the opportunity to have the conversation. I'm excited about the work that you're doing. I'm glad I could contribute to it in some way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Shells Exchange podcast. You can check us out at theshellsexchange.com and the Shells Exchange on Instagram. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.